At the time of uploading this, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet will be less than 24 hours away. So with this being my last video before Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, I'm going to talk about some day one team compositions that you can use on the ranked ladder. To avoid big spoilers, I will not have any new Pokemon actually put in these teams. But there will be a little bit of spoiling because the Pokemon that I chose for these team compositions are ones that have been leaked to be coming in the base game of Scarlet and Violet, though I don't know if some are version exclusive or not. So two of these teams will be just basic team cores, so it's going to be the default 4, and it'll be up to you to pick the next 2 for the team, which is usually just counter picks, or if you want to throw your favorite mon in there and try to fit it into the team, you can do that too. But the third team is going to be a full team because it's a pretty neat team from a past competitive meta that apparently all of the Pokemon in that team are actually in Scarlet and Violet. So without further ado, let's get into Team 1. And this might be familiar if you've played Gen 8, because you see Colossal Dragapult. Now, since Showdown doesn't actually have Terra type up yet, I'm using Hidden Power as a placeholder for Terra type and Terra Blast. So this is a Steam Engine Colossal with Grass Terra type, and Power Herb combined with Meteor Beam is the way to give it high offense, which I don't actually know if Meteor Beam's confirmed for Gen 9, but hopefully it is, otherwise this build's gonna have to be different. I have the speed stat set up to where when Steam Engine activates, it is faster than Dragapult. So it can outpace most Pokemon outside of some fast ones behind Tailwind. But this also allows for a decent amount of bulk, so this should be able to take a few hits, as well as a very high investment in special attack. And for consistency, I do have Protect on this. The Terra Blast will be turning into Grass, and of course Heat Wave because this is a fire type. And the default lead is comparing this with Dragapult. Now, the Terra type on Dragapult is a lot less important because you're most likely not going to be using it, so I just have it placeholder Dark. And this is a classic Colossal setup Dragapult. So you have Focus Sash, Clear Body. I accidentally put Dragon Dance on this, hang on. There, it's supposed to have Dragon Darts. And obviously Surf sets up your Colossal so that Steam Engine activates. And having Colossal be a Grass type means it actually resists the Surf. So it doesn't do a lot of damage at all. And Power Herb is what gives you the offense, so you're basically set up to sweep turn 1. Now, as a little bit of extra support, this does have Will-O-Wisp, and does have a little bit of offense in the form of Dragon Darts and Phantom Force. And I'm just running it max speed, max HP. You could put physical attack in this if you wanted to. Since it is a Focus Sash build, it is guaranteed to live 2 hits anyway. But all these sets are basically placeholders. You can adjust them to fit your needs, or to fit the extra 2 mon that you're going to have in the team. And popular in a lot of Dragapult Colossal teams is Gastrodon. Now, Gastrodon's going to be a relatively offensive but still quite bulky answer to Trick Room. So it had speed down, it's quite slow as you can see, and Leftovers Protect gives it some stall capabilities. And instead of running Recover, it's going to be running Terra Blast, because this will be an alternate Terra Blast sweeper for your team, which you can actually set up its special attack with Dragapult Surf, which will activate Storm Drain. Now, I have the Terra type set to Fire. That's probably not the best option, but it does help you in those Sun team matches, even though Colossal plays very well into Sun teams. If for some reason you're not going to be able to bring Colossal because of how their Sun team is set up, or it's like a hardcore Trick Room team, Gastrodon's a little bit better suited for that. And you can still support it with Dragapult. And if this is fighting Torkoal, Terra type Fire is going to be really hard for Torkoal to hit, especially if it's running Solar Beam. And since you will still have Stab on those Earth powers, you can just keep whacking the Torkoal until it eventually goes away. Though you could definitely go for other Terra types on this. Like, I could definitely see Grass or Ice if you're willing to be more vulnerable to super effective hits. Or even just Ground if you want stronger Earth powers, that works too. So I wouldn't take this particular choice of Terra type as like something that needs to stay. This is kind of flexible, just depending on the extra coverage you have with the other 2 Pokemon and what specific Trick Room you want this Gastrodon to counter. Next up is Grimmsnarl, and this is a classic Light Clay screens with Fake Out instead of like Scary Face. And the reason for that, I happen to think Grimmsnarl is a very good fake out user, and it's also typically not expected to see fake out on a Grimmsnarl. So you get a little bit of that surprise factor. Of course, the screens for consistency gives you some bulk. Really pairs well with Gastrodon and Colossal having relatively bulky stats. And the Terra type on this is going to be one of those very situational, I need a random out Terra type. I really need the Grimmsnarl to not get one hit by a poison move. So I have this sitting as Steel, just as a way to flip its defensive spread so that it's not going to get one hit by a poison or fairy move. Also, its spread is very defensive. I do have one tick on speed so that it can outspeed other Grimmsnarls and fake it out. Now, this team is actually kind of designed to handle the second team that I'm going to show, because I predict the second team is going to be pretty common in the early meta. So I've seen it mentioned around in the competitive scene that Torkoal combined with Lilligant will be quite strong in the format, and also Oranguru as the Trick Room option to set up Torkoal that way. So let's take a look at this team. This is my version of that build. You can adapt it to fit how you want it to play. I put the wrong move on this, hang on. Okay, now we can talk about the team. So this is a pretty standard Charcoal Drought Torkoal running Fire Terra type, because you want really strong eruptions to be coming out of this. That's why I also have this 252 on special attack, and you have no need for speed with this team, so you want it as low as possible. And you also have no need for Terra Blast, because the way this is set up, you won't actually get any benefit from having Terra Blast. So Eruption, Heat Wave are your spread moves and your fire moves. Earth Power is just coverage, which you could run Solar Beam, but there's already two grass types I have in this team, so you won't get much benefit from having another grass move. So Earth Power just adds some extra coverage, and of course Protect for consistency. And the default is to pair this with Lilligant. Now, as for the Terra type on Lilligant, I'm just going to leave it grass, because I think its typing is very well suited to be paired with Torkoal, and I feel like there's no reason to even think about changing it. And this is going to be run Focus Sash Chlorophyll with 252 on the speed stat, so this thing can outspeed anything that's not priority moves, essentially. And the thing about Lilligant is you get access to some really good support moves, such as After You and Sleep Powder. So you have really fast Sleep Powders you can put into your opponent, or you can use the high speed stat to make your Torkoal very fast outside of Trick Room with After You, which will enable you to get full power eruptions into your opponent before they can react. But sometimes this is not an option that is actually going to work, which is why we have the backup lead in the form of Torkoal Oranguru, which is also why Torkoal has Protect. You can go for the very obvious classic Protect Trick Room with Oranguru Torkoal, which if your opponent did not lead to actually counter that, then you can basically sweep your opponent for free using Torkoal Eruptions that are Terra boosted, and Instruct will let you use 2 of those per turn. Now I have this set up Cobra Berry because it's most likely going to get hit by a dark move and not a bug move, because why would you be running bug moves? And this is also set up very bulky. Size Shock is so this has a little bit of physical offense. You can see that this team does not have a lot of physical offense, so for the additional 2 Pokemon that you're going to build into this team, you're most likely going to want something with physical attacks. And just to be fun, there's Ally Switch, always can throw people off, you never know. And now for the number 4, which when people have talked about this like Torkoal Lilligant Oranguru team, I have not seen any mention of Sunflora as an additional option for Trick Room. So Sunflora is really slow. It's not quite as slow as Torkoal, but it is slow enough to function well in Trick Room. This also has access to Solar Power, which combines very well with Torkoal and Trick Room. And I have this thing set up for maximum special offense, because you're going to want to be hitting things as hard as possible with this, which it definitely has the stats to do it. And I also put Life Orb on it just to kind of guarantee that you're not going to want to be taking the hits that are coming from the Sunflora. Now I have the Terra type set to Rock, mainly because it has a completely different defensive spread than Grass, and it could also give you access to strong Rock type moves, which depending on the other 2 Pokemon you add in this team may not be the right Terra type for this. I could also see running Ice or maybe Ground, but for now I just have Rock sitting here, and you would be using Terra Blast to have your Rock type stab. I have Energy Ball and Solar Beam as well. You could swap out one of these for Protect, most likely Solar Beam for Protect, because that Energy Ball is already going to be hitting very hard, but this is just like the full offensive version, and Sledge Bomb for a little bit of coverage. in case you need to hit a grass type with the Sunflora. Personally, I think this is going to be a really hard team to break when you have good coverage in the form of the other two Pokemon that can cover this team's weaknesses. Which is why I built the first team the way that I did, because I'm thinking that Torkoal team or adaptations of that Torkoal team is going to be quite popular. So having this kind of Gastrodon basically shuts the whole thing down. And outside of Trick Room, there is also the Colossal, which is not going to take a lot of damage from Eruption and will also activate Steam Engine. So I think this team is well suited to counter. Now the last one's a full team, and you might recognize this team if you are caught up on your competitive Pokemon history. So this is basically a carbon copy of a very classic team that I believe won a tournament back in 2014. So the default is Pachirisu Gyarados because Pachirisu covers Gyarados very well. All these Mon are running the same spreads and mostly the same item, but back then the Gyarados was a Mega, so you won't be able to be running the Mega Stone on this. Now the Pachirisu is a support, obviously. It's designed to take several ground type hits on the physical side, especially when combined with Gyarados' Intimidate. This is also Volt Absorb, Follow Me, and the reason for this is so it can redirect those potential electric type hits that may be going into Gyarados. Now it's still not going to work against Electro Web, but you do have some options for Electro Web in this team as well. As for Terra type, you're never going to use the Terra type on Pachirisu, but I have it set to Flying as a potential out in a very unlikely scenario. Next up is the Gyarados. Now the Gyarados, I think Terra type Ground works very well with Gyarados because it gets rid of your electric type 4X, and this is the same moveset from that classic tournament team. And the thing about having Terra type Ground is you'll be able to have Stab Earthquakes, and if you could ever get a Dragon Dance off and then just start spamming Terra boosted Earthquakes, you have a ton of offense in this thing. Now as for item, I have Expert built as kind of a placeholder here. I really think Covert Cloak is the choice item for Gyarados, because you can actually bait a Fake Out if you predict that the only thing going into that slot is a Fake Out, because Covert Cloak will prevent the flinch from the Fake Out, and that can give you access to a free Dragon Dance, which could make for quite a nice sweep that your opponent would just not be ready for. Now, even though this is a very old team, it does still have some EV spreads that would work in a modern meta. For example, this Gothitelle. I believe the special defense combined with the HP is designed to take a Choice Spec Dark Pulse from Hydreigon. The thing is, it could also take a Dark Terra boosted Dark Pulse from Hydreigon because of that, as long as it doesn't have an offensive item. So the defensive spread is still quite usable even today. And while this set did not actually run Trick Room, I could see running Trick Room as maybe an answer to Tailwind teams. Although with most Tailwind teams likely going to be using Murkrow, this team oddly enough has an answer to that. So I thought this Talonflame build was exceptionally strange when I first saw it. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. But after reading more up on it, I can see why it was built this way. And in Gen 9 early meta, it actually has a point. So this Brave Bird here, combined with Gale Wings, is going to be crucial in countering Murkrow. So the thing about Murkrow is, combined with Covert Cloak, it is an almost unstoppable Tailwind because it's a dark type, so you can't Prankster Taunt it, and you won't flinch because of Covert Cloak. Though if I know anything about EV spreads, it is most likely going to be max speed, max HP. Because you're gonna still want to have speed stat, even if it's technically unstoppable, just to avoid, say, some potentially strong priority moves from outspeeding you. The thing is, there's no way it can outspeed Talonflame, because the max speed you can get onto a Murkrow is about 20 below the speed that this Talonflame build has. So what you can actually do is put a Gale Wings Life Orb boosted Brave Bird into Murkrow, and if it's not max physical defense and HP, it is a guaranteed one-hit KO. So this actually has a answer to Murkrow built into it, which I think is pretty neat that this team can actually cover that, even though it's such an old team. Now, the Gardevoir is Choice Scarf. I don't actually know the reasoning behind Swagger on this. I'm not too familiar with the entirety of what this team does. I just know that this is the Gardevoir build, which I also don't know what Terra type would really fit this, so I just have it for Dark right now. Also the Talonflame, Flying, just in case Murkrow is max physical defense, max HP, and has light screen paired with it, then you could still potentially go for the fast knockout by terastallizing Talonflame, although that's really not the best idea. Also, did I say light screen? I meant reflect. And last is the Garchomp, which is a Jolly Max Speed, Focus Sash, Rough Skin, pretty standard Garchomp. It doesn't really do anything special. And again, I don't really know the Terra type that would be super fitting on this one, so I just have it set to Dragon, because this team is really set up for Gyarados to be your main sweeper. So Gyarados would probably be your main Terrastallizer as well, but this could kind of be a backup in case you needed it. And again, not too familiar with how this team plays. I've never used it before, so I'm not entirely sure of how this thing is used in this team. But the thing about these old competitive teams is they have a lot of consistency and a lot of coverage built in. So this could be a solid day one option that if your opponent's never seen the team before, you're probably going to catch them by surprise with how effective this thing is. However, an opponent that knows this team, the ins and outs of it, you might have a hard time getting it to work in a scenario like that, just because it's such an old team. And keep in mind, we don't really know how strong a lot of the new Pokemon are going to be, so this team could be completely hard countered by one of the new Pokemon. But this, along with the other two, will be some good compositions as well as this full team here to kind of get you started and just learning the format. Though I'm sure there's also going to be some rental teams by players much better than me that you'll be able to have access to pretty quickly as well. But if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe. I'm going to be making a lot more. I will be covering competitive viability of certain Pokemon, as well as just playing with those Pokemon on the ranked ladder with teams that I build. So if that sounds like something you may be interested in, then you may want to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss out on the content coming up. And thanks for watching.